You step into the cool hush of stone corridors, where every footstep echoes like a memory. Here, among worn sandals and flickering candles, silence was more than peace. It was a weapon, a vow, a form of power. Tonight, let me take you back to the monasteries of the medieval world, where quiet shaped lives and unspoken rules whispered louder than sermons. Close your eyes and follow the silence. You wake before the bell. Not because of sound. No sound comes here uninvited, because your body remembers the rhythm of this place more deeply than your mind. The air is still ink-dark and damp, soaked with the stone's midnight breath. Your eyes open slowly beneath the wool of your blanket, and even in the darkness, you can feel the shape of the chamber around you. Stone walls pressed close like folded parchment, straw-stuffed mattress beneath your aching joints. The cold is a living thing. It wraps your fingers and nudges your heels. It is not cruel, only ever-present. You do not speak. No one does. Not at this hour, nor the next, nor the one after that. Silence is your first and oldest companion here. It waits for you before dawn, follows you into prayer, lingers at your side through bread and labor and psalm. You do not fear it, not anymore. But you have learned to respect it, learned that silence, too, can bruise. The bell will ring soon. The dance has passed in the night, but lauds is coming. You sit up slowly so as not to rustle the rush-strewn floor. Every monk here wakes as you do in the hush between dreams and duty. The habit you pull over your shoulders smells of wool and old smoke, the kind from peat fires that once warmed the scriptorium in leaner winters. It itches, you do not scratch. Outside, the wind pushes gently at the chapel door, as if testing the resolve of its hinges. Somewhere in the cloister, a bird rustles its feathers in confusion. Night and day are uneasy neighbors in this season. You step from your cell into the corridor. The torches are unlit, but the moon has laid out its thin silver path along the floor. You walk barefoot, heel to toe, careful not to disturb the silence that coats the stones like morning frost. The walls breathe faintly with the scent of wax and lime wash. Somewhere far off, water drips in a forgotten basin. At the chapel's threshold, you bow. No one sees it, but the gesture roots you in the moment. You enter, and the cold deepens. Here, beneath the arched ceiling, silence thickens into something heavier. It is not absence, it is presence, a kind of breathless watchfulness. The others arrive one by one, robed shadows gliding into place. No greetings, no coughs, only the sound of fabric folding. You kneel. Your knees know the stone's familiar welcome. And then, in perfect coordination, the bell tolls. The first note is not loud, but it cleaves through the silence like a spade through soft earth. It is the monastery's heartbeat, and it carries weight not through volume, but through expectation. Now you begin again. Voices rise, but only in chant. The silence is not shattered. It is transformed. Gregorian tones ripple out into the air like smoke from a thurible, curling upward and vanishing into shadowed rafters. You sing because it is your duty, and because this is the one way silence allows itself to speak. And yet silence does not fully retreat. It crouches beneath the music, in the spaces between syllables, in the long notes where breath must be taken. It reminds you always that words are a privilege, that sound must be earned. In the rule of Saint Benedict, silence is not passive. It is discipline. It is vigilance. You were taught early on that idle chatter weakens the soul. Every unnecessary word is a door left open for sin to enter. And so, even now, after the final verse has faded, no one moves to speak. You do not turn to the brother beside you. You do not whisper thoughts of the cold or the ache in your knees. You rise with the others, wordless. The walk to the refectory is just as quiet. Along the way, the world begins to stir. A distant ox grunts, servant clatters wood. But within the walls, your silence remains intact. At table, there is no conversation. Only the rustle of pages, as the designated reader opens the lives of the saints, and the gentle clink of spoon on bowl. Lentils again. Always lentils. You once thought silence would be soft, like a blanket or a hush before sleep, but here you learned its sharper edges. How silence can be used to punish. Look from the prior, and your name is removed from the speaking rota. A week of meals without reading, without voice, without even the tiny permissions of speech in the garden or during work. You have seen brothers break under that weight scene, their hands tremble as they sought forgiveness, not with words but with bowed heads and quiet tears. Yet silence is not only punishment, it is also a refuge. In the garden, among the lavender and leeks, you learned how silence blooms. How bees speak without sound, how soil answers bare hands with warmth and patience. You learned the language of rustling leaves and turning earth. Their silence was not a weapon, but a balm. In the chapter house, when wrongs are confessed, no one interrupts, no one comforts. Each man must speak alone, and then fall into silence once more. The community's judgment arrives not with anger, but with stillness. A pause long enough to burn. Even now, as you return to your duties, the silence wraps around your day like a thread through linen. In the scriptorium, where you copy texts with aching fingers and a cramped spine, it sharpens your focus. You hear the scratch of quill on parchment, the creak of the wooden desk, the faint sighs of your brothers lost in thought. You hear the world's ancient heartbeat. It is enough. And when the sun finally sets and Compline comes, you gather again in that same chapel. One final prayer, one final chant, and then the grand silence descends. No words now until after lauds tomorrow, not even whispers. You return to your cell, fold your body beneath your blanket, and let the silence cradle you like a mother's hand. Outside, the stars shiver. Inside, the silence sings. You step into the cloister walk, and at once you feel the hush take hold not as an emptiness, but as a fullness to complete for words. The air here feels different, not quite still, but reverent, like it is listening. You move slowly, heel to toe again, your hands tucked deep within the sleeves of your habit. The cold stone beneath your bare soles reminds you where you are, and more importantly, who you are not. You are not the same man who once knew how to speak without caution. In the world beyond these walls, your voice moved freely, laughing, faltering, full of questions and warmth. Here your voice is rationed like firewood, a little for prayer, little for confession. The rest kept buried deep in the cellar of your chest, growing cool and heavy. The cloister surrounds a square of earth, a garden of sorts, though nothing grows for harvest. No onions or cabbages, no sturdy herbs, only grass, low and soft, and a few withered rose bushes leaning into the frost. In summer, there are lilies and bees. Now, in winter, there is only the skeletal hush of dormancy, the soft crunch of a frozen leaf beneath a careful step. It is a place built for silence. You pass under the low arches, your fingertips trailing the smooth limestone column beside you. It is worn where centuries of robes have brushed it. This is where the monks come to walk and think, or not think at all. Some say the cloister is a symbol of the sullen enclosure within which one meets God. You believe that? But sometimes it feels more like a waiting room for thoughts that never quite arrive. There's another brother walking ahead of you, his gait slow, his back curved like a bow drawn toward the earth. He does not turn. You do not call to him. Here even a footstep too quick can feel like an interruption. You follow the rhythm of silence, which moves in time with breath, with prayer, with a kind of invisible gravity that holds you all in orbit. To speak would be to shatter something delicate. Once, in your first weeks, you forgot yourself. You had risen late, flustered, unsure of the path to the latrine in the pre-dawn dark. You passed Brother Aldrich, near the refectory, and whispered a question, not even a full sentence, just a quiet which way. He said nothing in return, only looked at you slow and steady, and then lowered his gaze, as though mourning something small and sorrowful. The next day, you were summoned. A soft correction, a gentle reminder, and yet the shame burned hotter than any rebuke. The silence had rejected you, not the rules, not the men, but the silence itself, like a sacred creature whose tail you had stepped on in the dark. But now you know better. The cloister walk carries you past the chapter house, where the day's readings were once shared aloud and wrongdoings addressed in front of all. The wooden benches inside are smooth from centuries of retreating backs, nervous hands. You remember the feeling of that room when silence followed a difficult confession, a silence that did not console, but examined, a silence that asked, without words, have you truly repented? You pass the library's heavy door, its hinges quiet now, but scented still with ink, dust, and calfskin. Even there, among books and parchment, the silence held fast. Only the rustle of vellum, the subtle suck of a candle guttering in its holder. The occasional breath caught in the throat of a scribe straining to see in dim light. You reach the far corner of the walk, where a narrow bench sits tucked between two stone columns. You sit. The sky beyond the garden is just beginning to lift from gray to silver. A weak light spills across the grass, catching on the frost. In that moment, something shifts in your chest. Not a thought exactly, not a feeling either, just space. Just air moving inward. This is why the cloister was built. Not merely to contain, but to carry. To make room for what must rise in you slowly, without pressure, like bread left to rest before baking. Thoughts, griefs, memories, prayers, they surface here like fish to still water, gliding beneath the surface of your mind. You do not name them, you only watch. Across the way, a younger monk enters the walk, his steps cautious. You remember that carefulness, how in early days every movement feels too loud? He sees you and nods barely. It's not a greeting, just acknowledgement. So rule forbids casual speech, not communion. It's in silence, when shared, can be more intimate than any whispered word. You think of the world outside, streets full of shouting vendors, of fires crackling in open hearths, of children calling out and dogs barking, and the wind speaking freely across rooftops. Here, in contrast, silence is shaped like glass. Transparent, but firm. It holds you gently, but with boundaries. And yet you have come to love it. Not always. There are days when the silence weighs too much, when it presses against the chest and makes the bones ring hollow. There are nights when your dreams are full of mouths moving but no sound comes, and you wake gasping into the darkness, aching for a voice, yours or someone else's. But there are mornings like this one, when the silence feels like prayer itself. When the cloister is a vessel, and you are water, and all that is loud in the world has fallen away, you sit with your hands folded, your breath even, your gaze soft upon the garden's sleeping soil. There are no saints speaking now, no rules recited, no chants. Only the snow beginning to fall thin, slow, and without fanfare.
Yes.
It is a language the monastery knows well. You enter the scriptorium through a narrow, creaking door, worn smooth by the touch of countless hands before yours. It is still early, but the chamber is already touched by a dim amber glow filtered through thick horn-paned windows. The air smells of wax and wool, and something sharpening iron gall ink, whose bite rises in the throat like the memory of old nettles. This is the place where silence becomes a tool, not a boundary, but a brush, not a burden, but a vessel. You take your place at the long bench, the wood polished by the decades of elbows and forearms, by the gentle patience of those who came before you. The parchment waits there, stretched and scraped soft as skin. Your quill rests beside it, trimmed and sharpened just so. Feather once plucked from a goose that will never know its place in Scripture. No one speaks. No one has ever spoken here. Not in your memory. Voices do not belong among the sacred words. Only movement does. It's a quiet scratch of quill on vellum, the careful shifting of a sleeve, so it does not smear the letters. The occasional soft huff of breath when the lines run too long or the eyes grow too weary. You reach for the inkwell, and even that gesture is reverent. Outside, the wind stirs faintly. Inside, the silence deepens. It is not hollow, this silence, but close like a companion leaning in, waiting with you. There are 6 of you at work this morning, hunched in hooded stillness, heads bowed as though in prayer. Each man is a stone in the structure of this moment, each heartbeat a pulse within a shared vow. The Latin flows from memory now, not word by word, but as a stream guided by the grooves long carved in your mind. Write slowly, not for lack of skill, but because haste dishonors the task. These are not your words. They belong to centuries. To God, to silence itself. Your hand moves. In principio errate verbum. In the beginning was the word, the first line of John. You've written it 100 times, maybe more. And still, it fills you with the same cold wonder it did the first day when you were barely more than a novice. Eyes wide, fingers ink-stained, heart thudding at the soundless weight of such beginnings. You stop now and again, not to rest but to breathe. The ink must dry. The lines must be true. Each letter has its shape, its curl, It's measured width and grace. The quill dips into the well again, and you feel the tiny shiver in your fingers as you lift it like drawing up a drop of shadow. The brother beside you coughs once soft, apologetic, quickly swallowed by stillness. In this room, silence is not simply kept, it is created. Forged by discipline, shaped by patience, and it is alive, listens. You can feel it pressing gently at your back, watching the curve of your spine, the position of your hands. You do not fidget here. You do not sigh or hum. Even your thoughts grow quieter the longer you remain, as if the silence seeps inward, calming even the mind's restless tongues. Sometimes your thoughts wander to the margins. You recall how Brother Ivo once illustrated a bestiary in the edges of his Saltaire lion, leaping over an ox, snail wearing a crown. The silence allowed it, or perhaps encouraged it. In the silence, a kind of playful grace sometimes blooms. But not today. Today you return your gaze to the sacred line, to the steady rhythm of creation. You are not merely copying, you are preserving. This is memory set to page. Not yours, but the world's. The silence reminds you of this with every curve of your quill. Hours pass without notice. The light shifts slightly, gold to pale gray. A candle sputters and is replaced by a novice, silent and watchful. The chill in the room intensifies. You wrap your cloak tighter, but do not stop writing. You cannot. The sentence must finish. The thought must be whole. There is no breaking the flow once it begins, only continuation, like the hush between one prayer and the next. You finish the page. Your fingers ache. Your back protests. But inside you, a stillness has taken root, deeper than silence now. A quiet that breathes with you. You blow gently upon the page, watching the ink settle into the pores of the parchment like wine into cloth. It will last, this page. Perhaps 500 years, perhaps more. There is power in such quiet labor. Across the scriptorium, Brother Gerald stands and stretches. His movement is slow, almost drowsy. He walks to the window and peers out. Snow has begun to fall soft, large flakes drifting down as if reluctant to land. He does not speak. He does not gesture. But you rise too after a time and join him. Together you watch the snow. There is no need to comment, no need to mark the beauty aloud. It is enough to witness it. It's to let the silence hold it between you like a fragile bowl. You think of how the world outside must sound now, wind in the trees, firewood crackling, bells in far-off villages. Oh, you do not miss it. Not today. Because here, in this small room, you are part of something older than noise. A rhythm, a breath, a vow. The bell will ring soon. It will call you to sext, the midday prayer. Your hands will rest, your voice will lift again and chant, and then fall silent once more. But this silence, this one in the scriptorium, it will linger. It always does. You return to your desk, dip the quill, begin the next line. You wait at the threshold of the refectory, your hands folded beneath your sleeves, your eyes low, your breath slow and deliberate. Around you, the others gather in similar quiet postures. No shuffling, no murmurs, no glances pass like coins. The room beyond holds stillness like a bowl holds water, and to cross into it is to surrender fully. You do not speak here. You never have. Inside, the refectory breathes with old warmth. Long wooden tables stretch like ribs through the belly of the room, worn to a sheen by generations of meals taken without conversation. Light filters through tall, narrow windows, catching the dust that floats like motes of memory. The air is heavy with the scent of bread, of bean stew, of something faintly sour and eartha lentils, or boiled greens, or perhaps just the echo of 100 similar mornings. You file in with the others, single file, feet soundless on the stone floor. The benches groan as each monk takes his place, but no voices rise, no greetings pass. This is not a space for fellowship of the mouth. It is a space for discipline, for the nourishment of body and soul under the great hush of obedience. At the front, a brother steps to the lectern. He opens a book, whose spine sighs with age, and he begins to read. His voice is low, steady, unhurried. The life of a saint, perhaps, or a lesson from the fathers, or a passage from the rule. You do not look up to see his face. You do not need to. His voice is not his own it. belongs to the rhythm of the day, the pulse of sacred silence. The food arrives, carried in by the novices. Bread wrapped in cloth, bowls of porridge, a jug of water so cold it sweats in the morning air. All of it is placed gently, with care, without clatter. Each act is a kind of prayer. A wooden spoon set before you, a nod exchanged with bowed heads. You eat in silence. The bread is coarse, the crust tough, the porridge lukewarm and thick, but you do not complain. You do not even consider the idea of complaint. The silence here makes such thoughts feel loud, unwelcome. Instead, you focus on the sound of the reader's voice, the rise and fall, the pauses that fall like soft stones into a clear pool. He speaks of endurance, of a saint who walked barefoot through frost, of hunger and sacrifice, and the strange warmth that blooms in the absence of comfort. You swallow another spoonful of porridge and feel the ache of the story in your chest. Your fellow monks do not fidget. They do not gesture or chew with haste. Each movement is deliberate. Each bite taken with awareness. You imagine it from above, this quiet choreography of spoons and bowls and listening ears, like a field of wheat leaning toward a single breeze. You once thought mealtimes would be a reprieve, a chance to rest from silence, to speak of small things, of aches and weather, of a sparrow spotted in the garden, or a dream remembered. Oh, but that was long ago. Now you understand. Silence is the meal. It fills you in ways porridge cannot. It quiets the craving, not just of the stomach, but of the self, the endless need to declare, to explain, to be known. In the silence, you are allowed to forget yourself, to dissolve a little, to become part of something slower, older, larger. The reader turns the page, and the paper rustles like dry leaves. A moment later, he stumbles. One word misplaced. A silence follows, sharper than before. Not cruel, only attentive. Clears his throat, corrects himself, continues. That is the rule. Speak only when it serves. And if it must be done, do it with care. Even in reading, even in the holy words, there is room for silence to nest between syllables. You finish your meal, your bowl is scraped clean, the crust of bread eaten slowly, the water drunk without waste. The novices return and gather the empty vessels, their faces blank, their hands swift. They do not meet your gaze. They are learning, as you once did, that here, silence is not just absence. It is presence. The reader closes the book. His voice fades. And now the silence becomes complete again. A pause that feels not empty, but full. Like a deep breath held between two verses of a song. You rise with the others. You move as one body, robes whispering, benches creaking, feet soft on stone. You exit the refectory without glancing back, and the quiet follows you not like a shadow, but like a second skin. Outside, the air is colder. You feel it on your face as you pass beneath the cloister arches. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls, not loud, but final. The hour has turned. The meal is over. You did not speak. You did not need to. The silence spoke for you. The day folds slowly into dusk, and dusk folds into something deeper. The light no longer slants it, disappears altogether. One by one, the corners of the monastery are swallowed by shadows, and each hallway fills with the soft hush of woolen feet retreating to cells. 2 beds, to rest beneath the long arm of the grand silence. You walk with the others, the procession slow and solemn, as though you are drifting down a river of dimness. No words are spoken now, not a murmur, not a whisper. The rule is absolute. From Compline until Lauds, silence reigns entirely. And this silence is different. The daytime quiet is functional, structured, purposeful, held together by ritual, but the silence of night feels older, heavier. It is not made by men. It is only obeyed. You step into the dormitory, long and narrow and cold. The windows are slit thin and high, letting in only the barest trace of starlight. The chamber smells faintly of smoke and wool and straw, dry, tired scent. You pass rows of low cots, each one identical, each tucked neatly with a single blanket, a simple pillow, and a small wooden cross nailed above. Here, the silence thickens.
Ouch.
It presses at your throat, not with cruelty, but with certainty. There is no space left for words. not even in your mind. Your thoughts grow slow, muffled, like snow falling on snow. You feel the weight of your body in your bones, and yet you are light, like wax softening near a flame. You find your cot, kneel beside it, and close your eyes. You do not speak your prayers. You think them gently, slowly, in rhythm with your breath. You thank the day. You confess the small failings no one saw. You ask for mercy. You ask for strength. But the words, even in your mind, are beginning to slip into images, into sensation, into something less precise. You lie down. The blanket is coarse, but it welcomes you. The mattress is lumpy, but your body has learned its shape. The air is cold against your face and warm beneath the blanket. And all around you, the room breathes with the presence of others' brothers in beds. Barely stirring, already descending into sleep. Sometimes you hear the soft creak of a cot, the shift of a foot beneath wool, the long, slow exhale of a monk, easing into dreams. No more. Everything else is still. The silence of the dormitory is sacred. It is not just a roulette, it is a refuge. It's a shield against the self, against the temptation to fill the dark with noise, against the ancient human fear of emptiness. You once feared that too. When you were young, newly arrived, you dreaded this hour. Silence felt unnatural, then sharp-edged, suffocating. You would lie awake for hours, aching to hear something, anything, a voice, a name, even the cough of someone nearby. Your mind would race with memories from outside the walls. Music in a tavern, the crackle of fire, a mother calling her child. But over time, something shifted. The silence no longer pressed against you. It sank into you. It taught you that stillness can be deep and darkness can be full. You began to notice the texture of it, the way it hums softly in your ears, the way it settles around your chest like a cloak. In this silence, your thoughts lose their sharpness. Your sins feel smaller, more forgivable. Your breath becomes your only rhythm, and even that grows slow, quieter with each passing moment. You do not know how long you lie awake. Time here is fluid, unmeasured, a thread slipping through the fingers. But eventually, sleep begins its gentle pull. You hover at the edge, where thought dissolves into dream. You feel your limbs soften, your heart slow. The silence holds you not like a shroud, but like a cradle. There is no fear here. It's only the knowledge that you are part of something wide and old and vast. And just before sleep takes you fully, you remember something. A story you once read in the scriptorium, a monk in the 9th century who spent 30 years in silence. It's not just by rule, but by vow. Never speaking, never writing, only listening. They say he heard things no one else could, the stirrings of angels in the rafters, the echo of prayers left unsaid, the breath of God beneath the soil. You wonder if it was true. You wonder if in time you might hear such things too. And then silence takes you completely. The dormitory rests. The monastery rests. Even the wind outside has ceased its wandering. And in that hush, as deep as night itself, sleep blooms like incense in the soul. It is just a gesture, they say. A small tilt at the neck, a soft lowering of the gaze. You're told it is routine, nothing grand or demanding. But as the days unfold in silence, you begin to feel its weight. What seemed like a simple motion begins to deepen. You remember the first time you bowed? Your body moved, but your heart hesitated. You dipped your head quickly, unsure, hoping no one noticed your hesitation. The others did not correct you, nor did they speak. Yet somehow, in the stillness, you felt your lack of surrender echo through the room. The silence did not scold, but it remembered. In the monastery, a bowed head is never meaningless. You bow before the altar. You bow when you pass a brother. You bow before the meal, even when your stomach growls louder than the bell. Each motion is small, but never hollow. You learn that these gestures are not mere performance. They are language. The bowed head speaks without words. It says, I yield. I remember. I belong. It is not about humiliation. No one forces your neck down. No voice shouts commands. Yet slowly your head lowers more often, more naturally. The motion becomes familiar, and then sacred. It becomes a ritual stitched into your days like the rhythm of your breath. And with every bow, you begin to feel something else, an opening inside yourself. A space that was once stiff with resistance softens. There is a strange power in this surrender. You see it in others. You see it when a brother bows lower than necessary, not to prove piety, but because sorrow has made him humble. You see it when a head is bowed for too long, lost in memory or guilt. And you see it in the elderly monk, whose spine no longer bends, but whose eyes still lower with the same reverence. Even when the body forgets, the heart remembers how to bow. You learn that silence makes the gesture louder. A bow in a noisy world is lost. But here in the hush of stone and candlelight, it becomes thunderous. When you bow, the silence holds it gently, like a sacred name. The silence amplifies your intention, your reverence, your unspoken prayer. You no longer need to be seen. You only need to mean it. Some days you find yourself bowing when no one is there. Before the empty chapel, poised to walk beneath the stars. At the threshold of the scriptorium where wisdom sleeps in rows of bound leather. You bow because something inside you asks too. You bow not to people, but to presence. Not to command, but to belonging. And then there are the shared bows. When the abbot enters the chapter house, and every head dips in unison, when a funeral passes, and the whole cloister bends like grass in the wind, no one speaks. No one weeps aloud. But the bowed heads say everything they say. You mattered. You still do. And now we carry your silence with ours. Not all bows are the same. Some are shallow, distracted, hurried. Some are deep and trembling. And some, the rarest of all, are silent apologies, wordless confessions shaped in the spine. You learn to read them slowly. You learn to offer them when words would only wound. Over time, the gesture becomes more than habit. It becomes a memory carved into your posture. It shapes how you see others. You no longer meet eyes with pride, but with softness. You begin to see reverence in the small movements, the small sacrifices. In a bowed head, you see the entire life of a monk, devotion, discipline, and the desire to disappear just enough so that something greater may pass through. And perhaps in the end, this is what silence asks of you. Not to be voiceless, not to be passive, but to offer your presence without demand. To move through the world with a bowed head, not in fear, but in love. Not in shame, but in deep, listening stillness. You rise again, of course. The bow does not last forever. But each time you return to it, you remember, you return to yourself. You return to the hush between heartbeats. The quiet space where nothing is spoken, yet everything is heard. You return to the monastery's garden in the late afternoon. When the light has grown mellow and soft, when it settles upon the stones and leaves like a benediction. This hour has always been your favorite, not for its silence alone, but for the way that silence is different here. It is not enforced, not ritual, not rule. It is something older, more intimate. You walk the worn path between the beds of herbs and winter cabbages, your hands tucked into your sleeves, your breath clouding gently in the cool air. The garden is not large, just a plot walled in by low stone, with rows of hardy vegetables, low shrubs, and patches of earth that bloom in spring but now lie sleeping. Still it is alive with small sounds. The whisper of soil drying in the sun, the rustle of a sparrow beneath the rosemary, the groan of a wooden gate swinging in the breeze. No one speaks here, but the silence breathes differently. You kneel at the edge of a bed where the last of the onions huddle low to the earth. Your knees press into the cold ground, and your fingers dig gently into the dark, damp soil. It crumbles beneath your touch, fragrant with rot and renewal, a scent that is neither sweet nor sour, but rich, almost holy. This is the place where words are unnecessary, not because they are forbidden, but because the earth answers you in its own way. You pull weeds. You turn the soil. You trim the frostbitten tips from the sage and thyme, breathing in their ancient sharpness. And as you do, your thoughts settle not into silence, but into something like it. A stillness that comes from doing without striving. From knowing that this labor, like prayer, does not need an audience to be complete. Sometimes you remember your life before. You remember the clamor of the market, the chorus of clanging carts and vendors barking prices. You remember the awkward weight of spoken apologies, the blur of voices overlapping in anger or joy. And you remember how much of it, in the end, meant little. The sound was constant, but the meaning ran thin. Here each silence is thick with meaning. In the garden, there is no performance, no posturing. The plants do not judge your posture. The stones do not care whether your mind wanders. You could weep into the rosemary, and it would only shake off your tears in the wind. That, too, is a kind of mercy. You reach for the watering jug and tilt it toward the roots of the winter kale. The water streams out slowly, softly, like the reading voice in the refectory, splashes gently onto the leaves, then disappears into the soil, vanishing into the roots below. You wonder, for a moment, if the plants feel the water arrive, the same way you feel silence sink into you during prayer. If they, too, receive it not just as necessity, but as grace. A robin hops near, bold and small and brown. It eyes the turned earth, the worms your hand has unearthed, and begins to peck, quick and sure. You watch it for a long moment. In any other life you might have whispered to it, beckoned it closer. But here, even affection remains unspoken. You share the space with it quietly and then move on. Across the path, Brother Simeon tends to the leeks. His back is bent, his face nearly hidden beneath the deep hood of his habit. He does not look at you. He does not need to. His movements are precise, familiar. You can feel his presence the way you feel the warmth of a stone baked in sun clothes, but unintrusive. You remember when he was punished not for disobedience, but for impatience. He had muttered to himself during labor just a few words, a slip of frustration. The silence had punished him not with scolding, but with withdrawal. No greetings, no nods, no shared glances for days. It had stung him more deeply than any lash ever could. But here, now, his hands work quietly, steadily. The silence has welcomed him back. It always does, in time. It is not cruel, only careful. You finish your tasks. Your hands are cold and dirty, your knees ache. But something inside you feels clearer, as though the stillness of the garden has rinsed the dust from your thoughts. You rise and brush the soil from your sleeves. The sun has lowered. The shadows stretch long and thin across the earth. Before you leave, you pause at the old quince tree near the gate. It no longer bears fruit. Its bark is split and silvered, its branches thin. But you place your palm against it, gently, the way you might lay a hand upon an old friend's shoulder. The wood is cool. The moss beneath your fingers feels like time made soft. The monastery walls loom just beyond the garden, enclosing the silence again in rules and order. But here in this small square of earth, you have tasted something freer. You've turned toward the cloister. The bell will ring soon, the day will close. You will carry the garden's quiet with you, like a folded leaf tucked gently into the pocket of your soul. It begins, as always, with a summons. Not a bell this time, but a soft knock at your door, 3 even taps, spaced like a heartbeat. You rise, heart already slower, breath already deeper. You know the rhythm of this day, of this hour. Today is chapter, the gathering, the circle, a place where silence turns into mirror, and each brother, including you, must kneel before it. You move through the hallway slowly, your robes brushing the cold stone, your feet near soundless. Others join from other cells, emerging like shadows sliding toward the same point. No one speaks. You've long since forgotten the temptation to speak here. This monastery confession is not something whispered behind a screen. It is faced in silence, in full view, under the watching breath of heaven. The chapter house waits, low-ceilinged and round, its walls curved like a rib cage. Meant to enclose the quiet, hold it tight. The air is cold, inside clean, unsparing. The seats are arranged in a circle along the wall, low benches smooth from generations of penitent knees. You take your place, you bow your head. And then nothing but silence. It holds for a long time. No one stirs, no one clears their throat. No robes rustle. The silence here is not like the quiet of the scriptorium where labor softens its edges. This silence is sharper. A blade turned inward. You feel it rest just above your chest. The prior enters last, carries no staff, wears no different color, only the weight of many silences. He stands in the center, says nothing, then takes his seat like the rest. You wait. And then, one by one, the confessions begin. Not with speeches, not with stories, but with simple, spare admissions, delivered aloud, but quietly, each syllable pronounced as though it is made of stone. There is no drama here, no raised voices, no weeping. Brother stands, bows, and says, "I neglected the psalm at Terce," or I was slothful in my labor. Then he kneels. He says nothing more. And silence responds. It is not always forgiveness that comes first. Sometimes there is another silence, longer, heavier. A silence in which everyone else weighs the words, the intent, the depth, not to judge, but to feel, together, the gravity of one man's failure and his courage in naming it. You remember your first time? You remember how your voice caught in your throat, how it seemed to echo off every stone? You'd feared the sound of it more than the fault you carried. The silence had seemed to grow after you spoke, stretching out like a shadow. And yet nothing cruel came of it. No harsh words. No punishment handed down like a blow. Just stillness. A stillness that said, "You have been heard. Now it is your turn." Your knees are stiff. Your palms damp. But your voice, when it comes, is steady. I was distracted during prayer. You do not offer explanation. You do not seek mercy in advance. The silence must have room to work. You kneel. And the quiet that answers is not cold, it is deep. You feel it like soil around a seed, enclosing your failure, not to smother it, but to let it change. Someone shifts beside you, not impatiently, just life, settling again. You feel something lift from your shoulders, not the weight of guilt exactly, but the burden of carrying it alone. In the silence, it has been taken up by the whole circle, not as gossip, not as shame, but as something shared and understood and then released. Other brothers stand. Other words are offered, forgotten fast. A sharp look during labor. A hidden pride. Sometimes no confession is made. That, too, is part of the rule. Even then, silence speaks for each of you. For the weariness in your hands, for the scatteredness in your thoughts, for the quiet ache of living day after day in devotion, failing often, trying still. At times you wonder if God lives in this silence, not in the chants, not even in the rule itself, but here, in this room, where men admit their smallness without embellishment, where words are few because they need not be many, because once spoken, they are carried into silence like offerings on still water. The prior stands once more. His gaze moves around the circle, soft but unsparing. He says nothing. He does not have to. The rule has been read. The confession's made. The silence has borne witness. And then he nods. You all stand together. You file out again, slowly as you came. No one touches. No one speaks. But something has shifted. You feel it in the warmth that lingers behind your ribs. You feel it in the way the air tastes fresher, like something inside you has been unclenched. You step into the cloister again, the sunlight weak but welcome. The sky above is pale and wide, stretched thin like old vellum. A sparrow calls out somewhere. You do not answer. You simply listen and walk. And let the silence carry you back toward yourself. You climb the steps slowly, one worn stone at a time, your hand grazing the cold wall for balance. The air grows thinner as you rise, and colder, touched with the breath of sky that seeps through narrow windows. This is a quiet ascent, always and always alone. No one else climbs with you. The bell tower allows no companions. Above, the silence thickens. You reach the landing and step into the bell chamber. Light spills in, pale and slanting, filtered through arched slits that face the four corners of the world. The wind slips through them like a whisper that has forgotten its language. You draw your cloak tighter. The bells loom above you, massive, silent now, their iron mouths open like sleeping beasts. You take your place on the wooden bench. You have an hour to keep watch. Not to ring, not to maintain, just to be present.
Right.
This is a tradition older than the rules. Older than the stones beneath you. One monk sits here each day and each night. Silent watch, a wordless offering. Not to guard against intruders there are none, but to bear witness to the turning of the world. You sit, and the wind sings gently through the stone teeth of the tower. The silence here is not the same as below. In the cloister, in the dormitory, in the refectory, the silence is shared, communal. It is something you participate in alongside others. But up here it is different. Solitary, vast. The silence wraps around you not as a robe, but as a sky. You feel it press against your chest, your back, your ears. It holds nothing and everything at once. The bells do not speak, not yet. Their cords hang still, coiled like sleeping snakes. You will not touch them unless the hour calls for a tan today. It does not. Your duty is only to sit, to watch, to be silent. From here the monastery lies spread below like a charcoal drawing, soft-gredged, fragile. See the garden, the chapel roof, the cloister walk. Beyond that, the bare fields, the skeletal woods, the long uncoiled river. And beyond even that, a faint haze that might be smoke from a distant hearth, or fog, or dream. Up here, you feel time differently. It does not pass. Pools. You once feared this watch. The first time you were assigned to it, you ascended with your stomach clenched and your mind full of restless thoughts, expected to feel something, some revelation, some sacred clarity. But you felt only the emptiness of air, the ache of your own breath. The silence, too large to grasp, had frightened you. But not now. Now you understand. The silence is not waiting to reveal anything. It is the revelation. You let your gaze soften. You let your mind loosen its grip. Begin to notice things. The grain of the wood beneath your hand. The way light gathers in the bells curves like water in a bowl. The sound of the wind curling through the openings, each pitch slightly different, like the tones of an ancient broken flute. You remember the words of an old prior, long dead now, who once said, "Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of attention." You did not understand then, you do now. Because in this silence, your attention becomes whole. There is nothing to distract you from the shape of your own being. Your faults rise up, unmasked, your thoughts slow to their truest form. You are not hiding from the world. Here you are seeing it as it truly is, without noise, without explanation. The hour passes slowly. Sometimes you pray, but not aloud. It's not even in words, just in breath, just in presence. You pray for the brothers below, for their aching knees and tired backs, for their silent regrets. You pray for the villagers beyond the woods, for their hungry winters and noisy taverns. You pray for no one in particular. You pray because to sit in stillness this long becomes prayer, whether you will it or not. At the far end of the valley, a hawk circles. The bell above you groans, just slightly expanding or shifting in the cold. You do not move. The silence holds. You remember a story told to you not with words, but in the margin of a manuscript you once copied. A drawing of a monk seated at the top of a tower, his hands folded, his eyes wide, looking not at the sky, but inward. And beneath him, written in pale ink, "Qui tacet videt," he who is silent sees. The hawk dives and vanishes. Your hour nears its end. You rise slowly. Your legs ache a little, but not unpleasantly. You bow to the bells. Not because they are sacred in themselves, but because they have borne more silence than any man could. And in doing so, they have become holy. You step toward the stairwell again. But before you descend, you pause. Just for a moment. You let your eyes drift across the world again. The snow has begun to fall so thin and light. You hadn't noticed until now. It spins gently in the wind, catching the light. It does not make a sound. You smile, just slightly. Not because you were joyful, not because you were moved, but because something in the silence smiled first, and you simply returned it. You descend, and the hush descends with you, all the way to the cloister. You step into the refectory, just as the bell finishes its last note. The sound does not linger long. It falls away quickly, like a breath held and then forgotten. And what replaces it is not the rustle of voices, not the clatter of chairs or the drone of idle talk. It is silence. It lives here like another brother. Always present, always listening. You lower your eyes. You bow slightly as you cross the threshold. The air inside smells of bread and boiled barley, of cabbage softened over a slow flame. It is not unpleasant. It is simple. Everything here is. The refectory is long and narrow, with thick wooden beams overhead and stone underfoot. The walls are plain. No tapestries, no icons, no painted saints to gaze upon. Only pale light from high, narrow windows, cast down like faint memory. Your sandals whisper across the floor as you take your place at the table. There are no individual seats, just long, unbroken benches. And no silver or pewter, only rough wooden bowls and spoons, set out with quiet care before the meal. You sit, you do not speak. No one does. You have not spoken at meals for many years. At first, it felt unnatural. You had thought a meal was for talking, for fellowship, for laughter around bread. This is what you had known before. But here, in the monastery, the rule forbids speech during meals except from one, the reader. He stands now at the wooden pulpit near the far wall. His head is bowed. In one hand, he holds a manuscript. In the other, a pointer made from smoothed holly branch. He waits until all are seated, until the prior gives a gentle nod. Then he begins. And his voice is the only voice aloud. He does not shout. He does not perform. His words come slowly, steadily, like water poured from a clay jug. He reads not to entertain, but to nourish. Today it is the life of a saint one, who suffered in silence, who fed the poor, who fled from pride like a thief in the dark. As you lift your spoon and sip the warm broth, his voice fills the room like steam. You eat slowly, you listen as you chew. You have learned to love this quiet rhythm. The steady scrape of spoons against wood, the soft sound of breath, the murmur of the reader. These are the sounds of your body remembering its place in the world, not large, not central, just one among many. There is no need for talk here. Nothing you might say would matter more than what you already feel in your chest, the calm warmth of food, the soft ache in your muscles from morning labor, the echo of words too old to be loud. You remember when silence at meals first challenged you? It wasn't the silence itself. It was the presence of so many others, all eating beside you, all held within the same quiet. You were used to solitude, but not this kind of shared stillness. It had felt like sitting in the middle of 100 held breaths. At first your hands shook, your spoon clattered against your bowl. Every motion seemed louder than thunder. But now it is different. Now the silence has made space inside you. It has taught you how to dwell among others without speaking, how to understand them not through words but through presence, a bowed head, a pause before swallowing, a softened gaze. These are the languages you have learned here. And sometimes they speak more than speech ever could. The reader turns a page. His voice does not rise or fall for drama. He reads the saint's miracles the same way he reads his trials, calmly, with reverence, because here the story is not meant to dazzle. It is meant to sink in, like warmth through wool. You tear off a small piece of bread. It is coarse but hearty. You chew slowly, feeling the grains with your tongue, tasting the salt from your own fingers. Every meal is like this, and every meal is different. Silence sharpens your senses, lets you notice the tiniest shift, a new herb in the stew, a softer crust, a brother's slower movements. You become aware of things overlooked in noise of, what is real and what is fleeting. You take another spoonful of barley. The bowl is only half full, as always, enough to nourish, never to indulge. You do not hunger for more, not anymore. You hear a brother cough once gently, into his sleeve, and then silence gathers again, unshaken. You glance at the reader. His lips move with quiet discipline. He has practiced this all morning in the library, tracing the words with his finger, learning where the syllables breathe. His eyes do not lift from the page. It is a kind of offering, this reading, a sacrifice of time, of attention, voice. And though no one says it, you are grateful. You finish your bowl and set your spoon across the rim. It's a small gesture, not rushed, not careless. You fold your hands in your lap and listen. The reader nears the end. You can feel it in the cadence of his tone, the rhythm of the words. The saint is dying now. He speaks his last sentence. It is not grand. Only, Lord, I have loved your silence. And then the reading ends. The prior lifts his hand. You all bow your heads. A final moment of stillness. Then, slowly you rise. No one speaks. The bowls are gathered in silence. The bench is empty with the same sound they filled barely more than a murmur of cloth and footfall. You walk again through the door, into the corridor, into the thin, sunlit air. You do not need to speak to carry what was shared, carried in the warmth behind your ribs, and the way your pace has softened. In the memory of a meal where no one spoke, and yet everyone was heard, you step into the scriptorium just after dawn. The light is thin but clean. It spills through high, glassless windows like the breath of angels cool, colorless, and tender as snow on skin. You blink once, adjusting. The air smells of scraped vellum, melted wax, and the faintest trace of ink and old cedar. There are already 3 brothers at the long tables. They do not lift their heads as you enter. One copies from a psalter, the letters shaped like prayer itself, tight, upright, reverent. Another holds a blade to parchment, scraping a mistake so gently you would think he was coaxing breath from bone. The third sharpens a quill, his strokes slow and circular, as though polishing thought itself into form. No one speaks, not here. The scriptorium is a sanctuary not only of text, but of silence. You take your place at the far end of the room, at the corner nearest the window. This is your usual station. The light strikes at an angle here that is kind to the page, but does not blind. You roll back your sleeves, draw your tools from the oiled leather pouch quill, penknife, inkhorn ruler. You breathe once, deeply, and begin. The parchment resists slightly, as it always does. It is not like paper. It bears the memory of skin, of being alive. Every sheet is different, some thicker, some almost translucent. Some carry faint ghosts of hair, but all must be treated with care. You dip your pen into the ink, watching the dark bead gather at the tip like a droplet of thought. The first letter flows, then the second. You are not writing your own words, of course. You are copying. Today, it is a treatise on divine patience, something penned by a long-dead monk, who never left his abbey, but managed to touch the world all the same. His words are strange at times, twisted into long coils of logic and metaphor, but they are sincere. You trace them with care, line after line, shaping each letter as if it were a relic. And in this act, you disappear. Not into distraction, but into devotion. There is no room here for ego or invention. It's only the faithful reproduction of what came before. You do not create, you serve. And in that service, something in you softens. The silence allows you to become small, and, in being small, you feel held. You glance up briefly. The brother beside you blots his page with a square of wool. The parchment drinks it in gently. He returns to work without sound. You watch the way his hand moves, steady, practiced, as though he is not writing but breathing through ink. Outside, a bird cries once and falls silent again. The world beyond the scriptorium does not disappear. It simply quiets. The bells will ring again at terce, calling you to prayer. The kitchen fire will crackle to life. Someone will sweep the cloister walk. But for now, all that matters is this: a quill, a thought, a word, a line. You pause briefly to trim your pen. The knife glints in the sun. Its edge is sharp but not threatening. It's a tool of precision, not violence. You draw the blade along the quill, shaping the nib to a clean point. The scrapings fall like tiny shavings of thought. Then you dip again and continue. There is something almost holy in this repetition. Line after line, loop after loop. You begin to memorize the way the letters lean into one another, the shape of a capital D, the slant of the descender in a G. You find yourself whispering the text silently in your mind, not out of disobedience, but out of rhythm, like a song hummed too softly to be heard. Your neck aches slightly. You pause, rolling your shoulders slowly, gently, without drawing attention. No one speaks. But each of you senses the others. You breathe in unison. You move in parallel. You are alone together, an island of quiet hands and focused hearts. At times you wonder who will read this book when you are gone. Perhaps no one. Perhaps it will sit on a shelf for centuries, its binding stiffening with age, its letters fading with each winter's damp. Or perhaps it will be found by some future monk, who will open it with wonder and run his fingers over your careful script, whispering, "This was done well." But even if it is never read, it matters. It's because in the doing, you offer something unseen. You offer time and care and reverence. The scriptorium teaches you that not all good things must be heard or noticed. Some goodness is quiet. Some beauty hides in margins. Some prayers are written, not spoken, and still rise to heaven just the same. You turn the page. Your eyes are dry now, and your hand trembles slightly from the cold, but you continue. The final lines of the chapter unfold beneath your quill, curling into their rightful place. You draw the final period, a simple dot. But somehow it feels like a seal, a blessing, a closing breath. Then you lean back. You do not smile, but something within you softens, like a bowl placed gently down. Across the room, a brother stretches his fingers, joints clicking softly in the stillness. The sun climbs higher. Its light begins to shift. And with it, the scriptorium glows, quietly like gold beneath snow. You begin again. Not because you are required, but because you are ready. Because in the silent labor of the scribe, you have found something larger than praise. You have found peace. And peace, like ink, must be given shape again and again across vellum, across time, across silence itself. You are barely awake when the flame is lit. It flickers just beyond the reach of your closed eyes, a soft flutter against the blackness of sleep. You do not move yet. You lie still beneath your woolen blanket, your breath rising in shallow clouds, your limbs curled tightly into themselves like a fern waiting for warmth. But the flame is real, and that means the silence is lifted. For a moment, you open your eyes slowly. The dormitory is dim, its long, narrow space cloaked in shadows that stretch across the stone floor like folded robes. The arched ceiling above vanishes into gray. Along both walls, the bodies of your brothers lie motionless, each swaddled in his own bundle of sleep. Only one is awake, the one who bears the flame. He carries it carefully, shielding the little candle with his hand. Its light dances across his features, softening the harsh angles of his face, warming the hollows beneath his eyes. He does not speak. He does not need to. The light is the message. The vigil has ended. You may rise. There are no bells at this hour, no spoken call. In these pre-dawn moments, the monastery does not ring, it breathes. The candle becomes the voice, and it says gently, "Come." The dark is not forever. You sit up slowly. Your joints ache from the cold, from the stiff board beneath your blanket, from the weight of another night pressed into your limbs. But you move without complaint. It is not a time for words, not even whispered ones. Silence still reigns here, though with looser hands. The night's vow is ending, but not yet broken. You dress in layers, robe, hood, a second pair of woolen socks. You lace your sandals with practiced fingers. The candle-bearer has moved on now, passing to the next brother, waking him as he woke you with light, not sound. The flame continues its slow pilgrimage down the line of sleepers, calling them one by one into the hush of the coming day. You step into the corridor. It is colder here, and darker. No windows along this stretch. The stones underfoot are damp. Your breath escapes in little white wisps that vanish before they can settle. You walk carefully, the silence wrapping tighter now, like a shawl drawn close in wind. In the chapel, another candle burns on the altar. You bow your head as you enter. The room holds the stillness of centuries. You can feel it, thick in the air, as though all the quiet prayers ever spoken here still linger, suspended in the dim. The wooden benches wait. The air smells of old wax, of incense ground into dust, of damp stone and faint lavender oil. One by one, the others arrive. No one nods. No one meets your eyes. The silence between you is deep and unbroken, but it is not cold. It is not lonely. You are held in a stillness that does not exclude, but enfolds. The silence says, "We are here." We do not need to speak to know it. When the last brother enters, the prior steps forward. His hands are folded. His face is calm. He bows before the altar, then turns slowly, looking at each of you. And then, without a word, he extinguishes the candle. Darkness falls again. But this time, it feels different. Not a cloak, but a closing of eyes. Not an absence, but a rest. The candle was permission. Permission to rise. Permission to hope. Permission to know that even in silence, something watches. Something tends the flame. You close your eyes. And the first breath of prayer begins. Not spoken, but breathed. This is the office of vigils. The night office. It's the hour when the world is still asleep. And yet the monks rise, not to speak, but to listen. To keep vigil in the silence. To stand as watchmen, not over walls, but over time itself. The psalms are not sung aloud. They're breathed in the heart. You have learned to feel their rhythm in your chest, as if your own heartbeat carries the ancient words. Domini, exaudi, O ration in me, Lord, hear my prayer. But you do not mouth the words. You let them rise and fall within you, like waves in the dark, like wind over winter fields. You sit in silence. And slowly, as the minutes pass, the blackness around you begins to thin. It is not dawn yet, but the darkness lightens. Just enough. You open your eyes and see outlines. Now shoulders, robes, the curve of the wooden beams above. The world is returning, but softly, like a memory remembered in sleep. When the candle is lit again this time, not in warning, but in welcome, it does not pierce the dark. It blends with it. You rise again. Walk in silence to the refectory. Here too there is quiet, but a different kind. It's not sacred silence, but simple quiet, the hush of shared hunger, of early morning weariness. You eat your portion bread, a spoonful of beans, a piece of dried pear. You chew slowly. The taste is plain, but real, grounded. You savor the texture more than the flavor, the way the crust breaks, the way the warmth lingers on your tongue. You glance around the table. Each face is bowed in its own way. One brother cradles his cup with both hands. Another stares into the grain of the wood. Another closes his eyes between bites, as if thanking the food with each breath. No one speaks. The silence here is ordinary, earthly, and yet somehow it still feels holy. Because in a world where so many speak without thought, to eat in silence is to remember that life is more than words. When the meal ends, you rise again. You will return to the chapel soon, for lauds. And after that, the work begins, the garden, the library, the laundry. Countless unseen labors that make up the life of a monk. But for now, as you step into the courtyard, the air greets you like a song. The sky has begun to change. Above you, the first birds call out timid, testing, as if uncertain that the day has truly come. And in that moment, the silence breaks not with clamor, not with speech, but with a single thin line of birdsong. It does not shatter the quiet, it fulfills it. And you smile, just barely, because you understand. The silence was never empty. It was simply waiting. And now the world begins again. With breath, with light. With one quiet flame passed from hand to hand. There are no harsh words in the monastery, no shouted accusations, no open rebuke. Instead, when a brother missteps, something more subtle happens. Silence itself begins to shift, and it speaks louder than any reprimand ever could. You remember the first time you felt it? It wasn't dramatic. There was no grand moment, just a creeping awareness that the air around you had changed. Earlier that afternoon, you had laughed perhaps too freely while tending herbs in the garden. The sun had warmed your shoulders, and your voice had risen without caution. Another novice had joined you in quiet chatter, and for a moment it felt like the world beyond the walls had returned to you. But the monastery listens, even when it seems not to. That evening, when you entered the refectory, something was different. The usual warmth had faded not from the fire, but from the space around you. No one sat beside you, though there was room. Bowls were passed without touch. Eyes glanced past you without malice, but also without meeting yours. The silence had turned not sharp, but cold, like a window left open in winter. It wasn't punishment, not in the way the outside world understands punishment. There were no scoldings, no lashings of the tongue, just a quiet that pressed in around you like fog. You felt your own thoughts more clearly than ever, amplified by the stillness. The soft scrape of spoons against wooden bowls, the gentle lilt of the evening reading, these were the only sounds, and none of them acknowledged you. That was the lesson. Silence here is not just the absence of speech, it is a presence in itself, force, a teacher. Lying awake that night, you turned over in your mind what had happened. The laugh in the garden. The sound of your own voice echoing through the cloister walk. You had broken a thread in the fabric that held the community together, and though no one named it, the silence had shown you. You weren't alone in that experience. Over time, you saw it happen to others. A novice speaking too hastily during chapter, interrupting a senior brother's report. A moment of pride, or carelessness, or vanity. And always the same gentle withdrawal followed, not from cruelty, but from care. The silence moved in not to punish, but to invite reflection. In the world outside these walls, correction comes quickly and often cruelly. People raise voices, slam doors, offer shame instead of guidance. But here, correction moves like a tide, quiet, constant, leaving you to notice the wetness at your feet and ask yourself why it rises. When you confessed your fault in the abbot's cell, you expected instruction, perhaps even reprimand. But instead he listened in silence, nodding only once. The silence remained, but it was different now, softer, holding space for return. You understood that speaking was not the goal. The true change had already happened in the silence that came before, and slowly you were welcomed again. Someone met your eyes during prayers. A bowl passed to you with a gentle touch, a place reclaimed beside a brother during study. The silence did not announce your return, it simply allowed it. From then on, you measured your words more carefully, not because you feared silence, but because you respected it. You came to see that it wasn't a weapon used against you, it was a mirror held before you. In its reflection, you saw your impulses, your needs, your mistakes, and your capacity to grow. Silence in this place is an act of love. It draws boundaries, not to exclude, but to protect the delicate balance of monastic life. Each man here carries his own burdens, and silence is the space where they are laid down without fanfare. You watched others learn the same lesson. You saw pride soften into humility, rashness mellow into calm. Not through lectures or punishments, but through time spent in quiet awareness. And through the realization that being held in silence is not being cast out, it is being held accountable. Now, when a novice laughs too loudly beneath the garden arch, you do not correct him with words. You let the moment pass. Let the silence do its work, because it will. It always does. And when the novice grows quiet in the days that follow, when he sits alone in the chapel, listening not to voices but to stillness, you know the process has begun. It's not of punishment, but of remembering. You understand now that the greatest power of silence is not in its ability to correct, but in its ability to restore. There is mercy in silence, and wisdom teaches us to hear what goes unspoken, to feel the shape of our own presence in a room, and to know when we have disrupted something delicate and unseen. The monastery has taught you many things, but none more profound than this. Silence is not the absence of love. It is often its most honest form. You wake not to sound, but to stillness. The bell does not toll for matins, not tonight. The monks rise by instinct now, trained by repetition, by the rhythm of ancient hours. Your body knows the moment, stirred from slumber by a silence so deep it feels alive. Outside your cell, the air is cold. The stones beneath your feet are chilled, and you wrap your habit tightly around your shoulders before stepping into the corridor. The world feels untouched at this hour. No birds, no wind, no footsteps, but your own. The candle you carry trembles as you walk, throwing shadows that bend across the worn walls. The corridor curves slightly as it always has, but tonight it feels longer, as though the silence has stretched it. You pass other monks in the darkness. None speak, none nod. But you feel them, their presence humming beside yours. This is not the silence of daytime, measured, controlled, filled with tasks. This is something older, deeper. Midnight silence. It has its own weight, its own memory. It presses against your skin like mist, not wet but cool, and it clings to your breath as you descend into the heart of the monastery. The church is already half lit when you arrive, a line of candles flickering before the altar.
Ow.
Their light does not reach the arches above. The roof disappears into blackness, infinite and still. You kneel on the stone floor beside your brothers. Cold seeps through your knees, but you do not move. The silence gathers here, between chant and prayer, between earth and heaven. The first voice rises not loudly, not even confidently, but with purpose. A single tone, vibrating gently in the dark. It is answered by others, soft and low, a tapestry of sound woven from restraint. The chant moves slowly, like water around stones. It does not break the silence. It grows from it, as if the silence were its root. You do not sing tonight. Your throat is dry, your thoughts too loud. Instead, you listen. You watch the flame at the end of the row flicker as a monk coughs gently into his sleeve. Even small sounds are magnified in this hour. A robe brushing stone, a breath held too long. A book opened with care. The prayers continue, but time feels suspended. There is no clock to mark these minutes. only the rise and fall of voices, the echo of syllables drawn from Latin texts long memorized. You close your eyes and the chant becomes a river, carrying you gently beyond yourself. You think of how many nights have passed like this? Hundreds, perhaps thousands. How many men have knelt here before you in this same space, hearing the same silence? It is a lineage of stillness, a heritage passed not in words but in atmosphere. Yes. In patience. In quiet faith. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to speak aloud in this moment. To fill the space with your own thoughts, your own story, but that desire fades quickly. There is something sacred in the surrender, something stronger than the need to be heard. In the darkness, in the stillness, yourself becomes smaller and freer. You do not vanish, but you change. The silence shapes you, gently and without permission. It carves away what is restless, what is loud, what is unnecessary. And in its place, it leaves something clearer, something whole. As Matins draws to a close, you bow your head. The final words of the hymn echo against the stone, then dissolve. No one claps, no one comments. The silence returns not to end the moment, but to hold it longer. You rise with the others, your knees stiff, your body humbled. The church is colder now, candles flicker lower. A single breeze slips through the southern transept, stirring your robe. You walk back to your cell alone. No one speaks. The silence follows you, not like a shadow, but like a companion. It does not judge, it does not demand. It simply remains watchful, ancient, whole. As you lie once more on your straw-filled mattress, you feel the cold in your bones, but it no longer stings. You pull your blanket close, but the silence wraps you tighter. And you realize, not for the first time, that this quiet is not emptiness. It is presence. It is prayer. It is love wordless, waiting, and wide as the dark. You enter the refectory with slow, measured steps, following the monk ahead of you in quiet procession. The air smells of barley broth and boiled root vegetables, familiar and faintly sour. No fire crackles in this room, though the walls are thick and the windows narrow. The only warmth comes from the bodies gathered side by side, rows of robes, heads bowed, hands folded. You take your place at the long wooden table, its surface scarred with centuries of use. The bench creaks beneath you, just as it always does, a small reminder of age and repetition. No one speaks. No one even clears their throat. The silence here is not cold, but sacred. It is not forced, but chosen. Your eyes move slowly across the table. The bowls have already been filled, simple fare, a piece of coarse bread beside a thin porridge. Perhaps a small piece of cheese if it is a feast day. It is not abundance you seek here, but discipline. The hunger is not only of the body, it is something quieter, harder to name. At the far end of the hall, the reader stands behind the lectern. He opens the large book with careful hands, the pages crackling softly like brittle leaves. His voice begins steady and low, carrying through the air like mist. It is the rule of Saint Benedict today. His words speak of obedience, of humility, of the power of silence. You eat slowly, each movement deliberate, spoon to bowl, spoon to mouth, hands steady, eyes lowered. The porridge is bland, but warm. The bread is dense, but filling. You chew without sound, your lips closed, your breath measured. Around you, your brothers do the same in orchestra of quiet gestures, a liturgy of restraint. There is something powerful in the stillness, something that sharpens awareness. You begin to notice details that would vanish in noise, the way the steam curls above the bowl, the faint crunch of crust between your teeth, the feel of the wooden spoon, smooth from many hands, worn like a prayer bead. You listen to the reading, though your mind wanders. It always does. Not in rebellion, but in reflection. The silence makes space for memories to return, for doubts to arise, for questions to be asked without being voiced. Why this life? Why this hunger? Why this vow? The answer does not come quickly, but you begin to feel it slowly, like the warmth returning to your hands. This silence is not emptiness, it is attention, a training of the self to listen deeply, to eat not just for sustenance, but with reverence. Sometimes you miss the noise of the world, the loudness of marketplaces, the laughter of kitchens, the chatter around hearths. But those memories feel distant now, like a dream you once had and can no longer fully recall. Here, silence wraps around you like a second cloak. It does not silence your spirit, it focuses it. The reading continues. The passage shifts. A tale of a brother who left the silence and returned to the world, only to discover that noise did not soothe him, that indulgence did not feed him. He came back thinner, quieter, grateful. You wonder if that would be your story too. Were you ever to leave? Your bowl is nearly empty. A small piece of bread remains. You consider saving it, savoring it later, but you eat it slowly, now, in this moment. You've learned to honor what is given, not just the food, but the hour, the quiet, the presence of others, without the need for conversation. At last, the reading ends. The book closes with a soft thump, and the reader bows. You all bow with him, your hands resting quietly on the table, your breaths slowing in unison. A short prayer is murmured only, then do voices enter the room, just briefly, like birds startled into flight. Then the silence returns, walking beside you as you rise, as you gather your bowl. As you exit the refectory and return to the world of tasks and quiet labor, the hunger fades, but the silence lingers, fills your chest like breath. It echoes in your bones like music. It feeds you in ways the body cannot name. Not all silence is peace. There are mornings when you feel it hanging in the air, heavier than usual. A stillness that is not calm, but waiting, tight, tense, brittle. You sense it in the way Brother Anselm lowers his eyes too quickly, in the stiff, hurried footsteps of the prior, in the way no one looks directly at anyone else as they walk the cloisters' curve beneath the vaulted sky. There are no shouted arguments here, no slammed doors, no whispered gossip in corridors. Conflict arrives without fanfare. It lives in pauses, in gestures, in the subtle withholding of kindness. In a life where words are scarce, the smallest change speaks loudly. You notice it in the kitchen first. Brother Elias does not pass the salt to Brother Hugo. Their arms brush, but no glance is exchanged. In the scriptorium, 2 quills scratch in rhythm, but no shared inkpot is offered. During Compline, the chant is half a breath off, still beautiful, still reverent, but not whole. The silence is fraying. You've felt it yourself, that tightening in the chest when your effort goes unnoticed. When your place in the line is taken, when your offering is dismissed with a flicker of the eyes. You've stood in prayer beside someone who has wronged you and felt the battle raging just beneath your robe. And still, you said nothing. Because here, silence is not absence, is armor, is penance, it is punishment too. There is no court for grievance, there's no space to vent, no room to raise complaint. If you are injured, you must carry it into prayer. If you are envious, you must confess it to the air, or bury it so deep that even your shadow forgets. That is the rule. That is the vow. And yet silence makes room for resentment to grow in the spaces between words. You've seen it settle into the corners of the monastery like frost. Brothers who no longer share tools, meals eaten with less grace, shared burden no longer carried evenly. The rule says to greet each other with peace, to treat one another as Christ, but Christ, too, was betrayed in silence. Once you found yourself alone with Brother Matthias in the garden. He was weeding the rosemary beds. You knelt beside him, working the earth in silence. For a long while, you said nothing. Then he nudged a stone toward you with his thumb. Just a smooth pebble, but in that moment, it felt like a gesture of truce. You took it, pressed it into your palm. No apology was spoken, but the silence softened. These are the moments when silence becomes its own language. Not empty, but layered one of friction, and also of forgiveness. You begin to see the ways in which the brothers offer peace without sound. A cloak folded neatly and returned. A bowl passed gently, despite a quarrel. A hand steadied as someone stumbles in the snow. It is not grand, it is not swift, and it is real. Forgiveness here is slow, like moss covering a stone. It does not announce itself. It does not come easily. But when it arrives, it transforms the silence into something holy again. You remember an old monk once telling you that every monastery has its ghost knot of the dead, but of unspoken words, the things never said, the apologies never made, the wounds never healed. And yet, he said, even ghosts grow quiet in the face of prayer. Tonight in the church, you sit beside Brother Elias again. Does not move away. You kneel together, heads bowed, hands folded. There is no tension between you, no tight breath, no sharp movement, just stillness, just prayer. Eyes. Just the gentle creak of wood as both of you rise at the same time. You do not speak. But you feel something lift. The silence does not bruise. It cradles. Not all quarrels need words. Not all peace needs proof. Sometimes the silence heals what it once held. You remember the day Brother Odo vanished. No alarm was raised. No bell was rung. No words were spoken. He simply noticed his place in the line was empty, his bowl left untouched at the edge of the refectory table. His robe, usually draped neatly on its peg, hung there still, but the man who wore it had gone. There was no farewell, no whispered goodbye in the cloister walk. Just an absence, like a candle snuffed in the dark. That is how departures happen here. In silence. Sometimes a monk leaves because the world outside pulls him back an ailing mother. A whispered doubt, a wound too wide for even the rule to close. Other times, he is asked to leave, gently but firmly, the abbot's eyes full of sorrow. And then there are those who vanish in the middle of the night, leaving behind only a pair of sandals and a folded blanket. You are told not to dwell on these things. You are told that silence is the proper response, even to loss, to grieve quietly, to pray more deeply, to trust that God sees what you cannot. But still, Brother Odo's absence settles over you like a shadow that won't lift. You pass his empty seat in the scriptorium and feel a flicker of unease. You walk past the garden he once tended, and the rosemary bush seems to droop. His laughter was rare, but when it came, it softened the room like sun after frost. Now the room is cold again, and yet no one speaks of him. You understand why. Words are dangerous here not only when they are sharp, but even when they are kind. To name his absence would be to break the rule, to disturb the peace. So you carry the memory of him in silence, like a stone hidden in your robe. Heavy but yours. Sometimes a brother dies, and that too is met with silence. When Brother Cuthbert passed, he was buried before dawn. The bells did not toll, the meals were served as usual, while the prayers were whispered as always. Only the candles near the altar were doubled, their flames flickering like two thin spirits dancing. You were the one who washed his hands before burial. They were cold and limp, but the nails still bore traces of ink. His final manuscript lay half-finished by his bed, a psalm begun, not completed. You ran your fingers over the parchment, the black letters trembling in the candlelight, and you wept, but not aloud, never aloud. Here grief is expressed not in wailing, but in labor. You dig the grave, you sweep his cell, you recite his name in the private folds of prayer. You do not ask why he was taken, or whether he suffered. You do not say you will miss him. Instead, you make his bed one final time, smoothing the blanket flat, and you leave the room in silence. Still, the monastery remembers. Not with monuments or stories, but in the way the brothers adjust. One voice fewer in the chant. One step fewer in the procession. A ladle passed without needing to ask who it used to be for. The silence stretches to fill the space where a life once moved, and over time, it hardens into memory. There are moments when you wonder what your own absence will feel like. Will someone notice the way you always pause at the third pillar in the cloister walk? Will they remember the tilt of your handwriting, or the way your fingers trembled during winter prayers? Will your sandals be taken down and given to another? Will your bowl be washed and set back in place, waiting for the next name? You do not fear death, not here. You have seen how it comes in soft robes, with folded hands under the blessing of silence. What you fear, perhaps, is being forgotten, not by God, but by the brothers who stood beside you for decades and never truly knew your voice. And yet, perhaps silence holds memory differently. Perhaps it does not need names to carry love. Perhaps your absence will echo in the rhythm of footsteps, in the way a candle is lit, in the hush of a room just before the bell. One day, you too will vanish into that great hush. The monastery will remain. The cloister will still hum with bees. The refectory will still smell of bread. The silence will go on unbroken, endless, whole. The air is thick with dew, cold against your skin. Darkness still drapes the world outside the stone walls, but within the monastery, a quiet stirring begins. Not with words, not with noise, but with movement. With the familiar rhythm of waking, the grace of duty, the soft shuffle of robes over ancient stone, you light a candle with trembling fingers, shielding the flame with your hand, flickers to life, casting a golden glow that dances against the cold gray stone. Round you other lights begin to bloom, faint halos in the dark, as the brothers begin to wake one by one in silence. And so the day begins, as it always has. No voice greets you. No conversation breaks the hush. Yet you feel connected, woven into something greater than yourself. A rhythm, a vow, a long, unbroken breath that is stretched across centuries. You are one note in a chant that began long before you, and will echo long after you are gone. You step into the cloister walk, and the silence enfolds you like a cloak. It is not empty, it is not void, it is presence, memory, prayer. The stones beneath your feet hold the weight of 1,000 mornings like this. The arches curve above you like ribs of a great beast sleeping, ancient and still. The garden beyond glimmers with dew, and somewhere a bird stirs in the fig tree. But it does not sing, not yet. In this monastery, silence has shaped everything. It has been teacher and jailer, balm and blade. It has hidden wounds, and it has healed them. It has been used to wound others, to punish, to isolate, to shame. Yet it has also been the cradle of grace, a silence that listens, silence that softens, silence that sanctifies. You have learned to hear what it holds, the unspoken regrets behind a bowed head, the gratitude in a shared glance over supper, the forgiveness in a hand that helps lift a burden. You have come to know that silence is not always peace, but it is always powerful. The rule told you that the tongue must be bridled, that idle speech must be cast aside, that conversation is temptation. But you have discovered another truth within that command. When words are removed, the soul must find another way to speak. And it does. In how you sweep a floor, in how you tend a wounded bird, in how you kneel beside another in prayer, your shoulders almost touching. This is the monastery's great secret. Not the chanting, not the Latin, not the bells or the incense, but the silence itself. It deepens every gesture, how it slows time, how it forces you to notice, really notice the world as it is without adornment. You begin to feel it even in your breath, the slow, even rhythm of your chest rising and falling beneath your robe, the soft tick of your heartbeat echoing in your ears, the hush inside your own mind. You used to fill that space with noise, with thoughts, with longing. Now you leave it open. Because in that stillness, something comes. Not always. Not loudly. No. But when it arrives, it feels like light breaking through stained glass, gentle, holy, complete. You walk toward the chapel now. The sky beyond the windows has turned a shade paler blue, diluted with silver. Morning edges near. The other brothers fall into step behind you, one by one, silent as ghosts. Together you move as one body, one breath, one great hush. You enter the sacred space and kneel. The stone is cold. The candlelight flickers. The silence grows deeper still. And in that stillness, you feel it. A presence too vast for language. A peace too delicate for sound. A God who does not need to speak to be heard. You close your eyes. You bow your head. You listen. And in the silence, you are home.